I haven't even thought about what we're going to call this. So I guess you got any ideas?
The podcast.
The podcast. All right.
Podcast.
So for you guys listening, this is our first try at a motorized bike oriented podcast. And before we get into all the kits, the engines, and all that stuff, we're starting off with what is a motorized bike, and we'll be answering a few questions such as what is a motorized bike, or what classifies a motorized bike, a legality of motorized bike, so if it's reliable on the road or not, and why should you build or buy a motorized bike compared to a moped or a dirt bike, motorcycle, etc. And I'm joined with my friend Keegan Hashe, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Keegan Hashe. He also has a YouTube channel, and we both do motorized bike stuff. How long have you been doing motorized bike stuff?
Probably a little over 4 years now.
Cool.
Yeah.
So same with me. And so first off, the first question, what would you classify a motorized bike as?
Yeah, good question. So basically, the way it works for me is as long as it has pedals and it's like a bicycle style frame, that pretty much does it for me. So obviously you'll see guys that put pegs on their motorized bikes trying to make it look like a motorcycle. But any single speed, two-stroke motor, like I said, there's a lot of people that put dirt bike engines on it.
Yeah.
That's too much power. That's a lot of stress, that's a lot of RPM. You get the whole deal.
Yeah.
So
pretty much
it has pedals.
Pretty much
tires.
a Walmart bike with a small two-stroke engine slapped on it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's obviously, bigger versions of that. I mean, you got a Piaggio,
yeah.
You got a Minarelli, you got a four-stroke. You can go up the ranks and stuff, and you can get bigger wheels, etc. But like I said, you just by looking at it, you can pretty much determine what it is.
Yeah. So I would say a moped is more designed around the engine.
Yes.
Whereas with a motorized bike,
this is a kit.
Yeah, with the motorized bike, the engine is designed for the bike.
Yeah, it's like they originally intended it to handle the power, originally intended it for the stopping power, whereas you got guys with Cranbrooks with, coaster brakes and things like that. But,
yeah. Yeah. So there's definitely, definitely limitations.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right, now to answer our second question, legality of a motorized bike.
Have you been stopped before by a cop?
Not at all, no.
Good.
I live in the States. Keegan here lives in Canada, which I'm guessing the laws are completely different depending on where you live. But here in the States, I'm in West Virginia, and the laws are much more lenient than Virginia or Pennsylvania. Depending on where you live, your laws and all that stuff, the 49cc is the limit. I don't know if that is for you. And
yeah, I was looking at the laws, just doing a couple quick Google searches and stuff, and they didn't really specify what cc is the limit. They basically just said if it goes over 25 miles an hour and it doesn't have pedals, then you need a license or registration, stuff like that. So if you could drive a moped here and you keep it under 25 miles an hour, I think you're okay. But it varies province to province.
And just
that's the thing.
Where I live, I believe it's under 35 miles per hour, for instance, I believe.
Right.
But as you said before, they don't really specify displacement and all that stuff. However, when you go into a province or another state, they do specify 49cc or anything like that.
Right.
So to answer the question of legality of a motorized bike, fellow viewer, I would say it completely depends.
Where do you live? Do your own research.
Yeah.
Like, build a bike, and you spend all the money on a motor, and you spend all the money on a frame. Just go ahead and Google some stuff, because the last thing that you want to do is be out on the road cruising around and get your bike taken away.
Absolutely. And just again, it not only depends on like the road laws and everything, but it depends on your riding style. If you're out there with even a completely legal bike, if it's 49 cc's and you're going 25 miles per hour, if you're all over the road, as well as not wearing, proper riding
protective gear.
Yeah. Like, even if you're following the laws, but you're not wearing a proper helmet, you're going to have issues. Have you, Keegan?
No, I've never been stopped, luckily, but there's been a few occasions where I've gotten some pretty weird looks, because I'm like, there was one time, actually, it was relatively close to my house, and a buddy was pulled on the side of the road. Like, I was going towards town, and he was on the right-hand side, and I just thought nothing of it. And I looked over, and I'm like, oh, he's staring me down. And then, like, he kind of, like, turned his wheel, and I thought, oh, he's about to go now. But luckily he didn't pull, so I don't know what he's doing. But, no, I've never been stopped before, luckily. Like I said, a few weird occasions, but I've even had cops wave, believe it or not, which I thought was surprising, because you look at the guy on a bicycle, and he's going like 40, 50 miles an hour. I mean, not usually. I only cruise about 30. But, like, you're going super fast, not pedaling. You're going to second-guess yourself. Like, has he got an electric bike? Has he got a gas bike? And you'd be surprised. There's a lot of older people that will think, oh, those are electric. I'm like, what is electric about an exhaust with a gas tank?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's weird.
Yeah, I've had cops wave as well. So, as I was saying before, I would not recommend it, but if you're following road laws and everything, and you haven't a completely illegal engine, you could probably get away with it. I don't know.
Yeah, I can speak from experience. What? No.
No, like my alcohol 212 bike, which is
that's crazy.
Completely illegal. I've ridden it downtown, and cops have actually like waved and stuff, but I never drive it recklessly. I mean, it's not super loud, and I always wear protective gear. So even though it's completely illegal, whatever.
Right.
All right. And so that pretty much sums up the legality of motorized bikes. Now, this is kind of more on the builder, but Keegan, why do you prefer motorized bikes rather than a moped or motor scooter or like a dirt bike?
Yeah, so that's a pretty good question. So, like, when it comes to pricing, like, this is the first thing.
Yeah.
I could very well afford, a dirt bike or a scooter, which, here's the thing with scooters. The scooters that I want are, like, in Quebec, which is, like, 8-hour drive. They're all, like, those little Yamaha BWSs. I'm not sure if you're familiar. They're like the Minarellis, right? They're like what the Minarelli top end comes off of. And that's the only scooter that would actually be caught dead driving on. So that's as far as scooters. No, because be honest, like when you're driving around scooter with a grocery bag, you think, oh, that's not very cool. Yeah. So like, yeah, BWS would be cool. But, and when it comes to dirt bikes, I enjoy a lot of different dirt bikes and riding them and stuff. But like, you don't get that satisfaction. You put the work in to make it yours. Whereas, anybody can have enough money to go buy a purpose-built thing. And you can make trail bikes. Like, there's no limitations. You can make something that, can go off-road and just as good. It's not going to be as smooth as a ride, but you can get to the same, destination and stuff. You can make, some pretty fast streetable bikes, everyday drivers, things like that.
Absolutely.
But I don't know. I just like they're a fun factor. Like, you're on this little bike, that's not designed to go that fast. And you're over there just cruising, ripping around. So
absolutely. And to build on your point, Keegan, scooters in some regard are more reliable and all that stuff. But the other thing is there's really no other option that's, one, easier to build, and two, in my opinion, easier to maintain, if that makes sense. So like,
no, that's true.
So while like a dirt bike or even a motor scooter or a moped, they might be more reliable or whatever. But if they break,
Right.
it could.
And here's the other point I want to build on. A motorized bike, like if I want to run to the store right now, obviously it's late, but let's say tomorrow I want to go get something at the hardware store, I want to go get food, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
I can go on the road perfectly legal. But if you try to go on the road on a, I don't know, YZ125, they're definitely going to stop you and probably try to take your bike or give you a ticket or a hefty fine. So, as far as like road legal, unless you have like a supermoto with like street tires, lights, then you got to pay registration, you got to pay insurance costs, which for a motorcycle are relatively cheap. But it's nice to not have that headache of having all that stuff around the bike, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So you can buy a dirt bike or a scooter, but for the same price, you could probably build 2 or 3 pretty nice bikes. You could have
exactly.
You could have a trail bike, that you rip around the mountain bike trails or dirt bike trails, and you can have one that goes perfectly fine on the road, the grocery getter, and you don't have to pay taxes, registration, all that stuff. So
I think like having multiple bikes is like the best thing ever, because if one of your main, let's say, everyday riders, right, they break.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? You just hop on the other bike and go. But I see a lot of people that be like, oh, I put all my money and I put all my resources into one bike, and they try to claim that that's the best thing ever. But I guarantee you, if that's your only mode of transportation and that thing decides to break on you, guess what? You're not going to work.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So having multiple bikes, like, it sounds like a crazy addiction for most people. It is, but for the average person, 2 or 3 is great.
Oh, absolutely. And it's nothing better than being like, oh man, one bike is cool, but every once in a while it kind of loses that cool factor. So it's like, if you have 2 or 3 bikes and you get tired of one of them, you can just start riding the other one, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
And of course, if you have brothers or a friend that comes over that wants to ride,
then they can ride too.
Yeah. And especially with motorized bikes, it's more fun when you ride with somebody.
Oh, for sure. It's like when you're riding alone at night, it's a different kind of thing. But like if you're just out in the day, in traffic, it's like that's kind of boring. But when you're with your buddies and you're ripping around, here's the thing though, it's pretty hilarious. Both of my friends, I won't mention their names because I don't want to get them upset, but they both have motorized bikes, and I helped them build it. They watch the videos, whatever, and one of my friends, they're pretty good with their stuff. They maintain it. Yeah. And the other friend likes to destroy stuff. He likes to beat on it, go off like jumps. So
like intentionally.
Shambles.
Intentionally.
Yeah, so whenever I, ask them, I say, come on over and ride. Guess what they're riding? My bike.
Yep.
Not theirs.
Yep, that sounds pretty familiar.
Yeah. I think, before we end up the questions, I think something we should mention is riding gear, and for motorized bikes specifically, I guess you say, what should you wear when you're riding a motorized bike? Because I can't sit here and critique what people are wearing because I'm out here riding with shorts half the time. But I think we should talk about that because a lot of new builders are on these bikes, half assembled, not fully broken in, and they're riding with no helmets, so they're riding with no gloves, etc. So
absolutely. So for the viewer, what riding gear should you use? And really, to answer the question, at minimum, probably long pants, denim, if denim's preferred, and a full face helmet. I personally don't wear gloves. What about you, Keegan?
I don't really wear gloves unless it's cold out, which obviously where I live, it gets pretty chilly. I'll wear a nice pair of motorcycle gloves, but for the summer, I mean, it's hard to put it because you don't want, when you go on a summer ride and you just want to get on your bike and go, because that's the time where you don't have to let it warm up.
Absolutely.
You don't want to put on gloves. You don't want to put on this and that. I mean, I do have a motorcycle jacket and I do have motorcycle gloves.
Yeah.
If I'm intending to go to town and, it's busy, 5 o'clock traffic, I'll be like, okay, this is the time to put it on. If I'm going on the back roads for a 10, 20 mile ride and there's no cars around, I'm wearing a helmet, some nice jeans or something, some proper like footwear, and that's all I'll do.
Absolutely. And another thing, definitely wear good shoes. I've seen videos.
Flip-flops.
I've seen videos on the Reddit posts of guys wearing flip-flops or no shoes at all. The one thing that you have to understand is don't take your safety for granted. Like, even on a motorcycle, especially on a motorized bike, anything could happen. Yeah.
And if you're on a motorized bike and you have V brakes or even disc brakes for that matter, that's not going to stop very quick because they're going to dart out in front of you. And if there's a car coming the opposite direction, you can't swerve, so you're pretty much screwed. So like you have to really ride very cautiously and not reckless, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and it completely depends, but I mean, some cases there really wasn't anything that you could do to prevent it, but that's very rarely the case, in my opinion. And of course, both me and Keegan are on the Facebook pages, Facebook groups and everything. I'm on the Reddit groups, and that's a whole other world. But I've seen people, riding on the sidewalks and all that stuff.
Dude, I know. And it's like, that's sketchy.
Do not do that. Ride on the road. It's safer to ride with all the other cars than riding somewhere else, if that makes sense.
I heard this hilarious comment. Buddy said, you should ride facing traffic so you can see it. I thought to myself, dude, that's literally dangerous. Like, if the person has to avoid something and you're on the road with them, you're gonna get hit. Like, I ride with the flow of traffic.
Yeah. And riding a bike or walking, I do recommend at least the streets near me.
That's totally understandable. But if you're going at a slower speed.
If you're riding at the speed of traffic, ride with traffic. Like, that's the safest.
That's deadly. Like, if you're both doing 35 miles an hour and you get in a head-on collision, you can say goodbye to your life.
Especially on a bicycle. Serious. For the viewer, this has been episode 1. If you like it, and if you think of a name that we should call this besides the motorized,
because we don't know yet.
Yeah, we're just calling it the podcast right now. So if you have any information that we forgot to touch on, or stuff we got wrong, or any topics you want to hear in the future, just let us know. Yeah. And check out Keegan Hashe on YouTube and A.M.B. Garage on YouTube.
Yes, sir.
All right. Have a good one. See ya.
Thanks for having me.